On March the 22nd of 2023, a dog walker spotted what appeared to be two life-sized mannequins in the thick brush off a roadway embankment in Washougal, Washington. The discovery proved to be the dead bodies of 27-year-old Michelle Melendez and her daughter, Layla Stewart. Both had fatal bullet wounds to the head and they had been missing since March the 12th. The main suspect in the double murder was Melendez's ex-boyfriend, Kirkland Warren. At the time of her disappearance, Melendez had a protection order against him after he was arrested for assaulting her and firing at her building. Warren was also out on parole for a first-degree murder charge in connection to the death of a man in 2017 in Arkansas. Following his domestic violence arrest and during jailhouse calls with Melendez, Warren repeatedly blamed her for the charges against him and told her she needed to figure out how to get them dropped. The woman told him, "Just tell me what to do," to which Warren responded, "Bruh, I don't know, it's all on you," and then emphasized, "There is no way I'm going back to Arkansas." Warren was charged with Melendez and Stewart's murders, to which he ultimately pleaded guilty. A charge of abuse was added after DNA evidence indicated that he had forced himself on Stewart. He would enter an offered plea on that charge, acknowledging that the state had sufficient evidence to find him guilty without admitting wrongdoing. A prosecutor held back tears in court as he laid out the facts of the murder, which were reportedly part of Warren's deranged scheme to cover up his previous crimes. In October of 2024, Warren, whom Melendez's brother described as a soulless being put on this planet, was jailed for life without parole. Number 13. Xavier Rugby. 38-year-old Kirsten Eileen Herman-Strang was riding an e-bike through 49th Street and 10th Avenue South in Gulfport, Florida, on the night of September the 20th of 2025. At some point, she was struck by a Nissan Altima driven at high speed by Xavier Rugby, who was intoxicated. The impact caused Strang to be thrown from the e-bike and she became lodged in the Altima's windshield. 22-year-old Rugby drove for another 8 blocks before Strang was dislodged from the vehicle. Rugby then sped away from the scene without checking on the woman and without calling for 911 or waiting for the emergency services. Strang subsequently died from her injuries. Law enforcement caught up with Rugby near 2222 49th Street South in St. Petersburg. He showed signs of impairment and refused field sobriety tests, whereupon he was arrested. The man was charged with leaving the scene of a crash involving death, vehicular homicide leaving the scene, and DUI manslaughter. As of the latest updates on the case, Rugby remained behind bars at the Pinellas County Jail. Number 12. Jake Saunders. On December the 10th of 2024, Englishman Jake Saunders met his girlfriend at around 4 p.m. in Dorset. The young woman would note that Saunders, who was at the time in his late teens, was already drunk. She ended the relationship, which enraged Saunders. Later on, he took his anger out on a parked Volkswagen Transporter on Abbotsbury Road. The teen ripped its windscreen wipers and a wing mirror off and then jumped on the hood. 75-year-old Anthony Jacobs was heading home from the pub when he confronted Saunders about his behavior. The exchange was brief and the elderly citizen was already walking away when Saunders charged him from behind and launched an extremely brutal attack. He took the older man down, then repeatedly kicked him and jumped on his head, delivering bone-crushing stomps. The onslaught lasted roughly 10 minutes. Even after the Good Samaritan went unconscious, Saunders repeatedly slammed his head against the concrete. According to witnesses, the youth then walked away apparently unbothered by what he'd done and continued vandalizing other cars. As he heard sirens approaching, Saunders tried to hide in a bush, but was discovered. He attacked 2 officers during the arrest and, after he was taken into custody, he brutalized a paramedic who suffered a broken jaw. Jacobs had dozens of injuries that included a broken shoulder blade and 6 fractured ribs. Nearly every bone in his face was broken to the extent that his own brother didn't recognize him at the hospital. Jacobs was placed into an induced coma for a brain injury and passed away after 9 days in the hospital. Saunders pleaded guilty to his murder as well as 3 counts of assault by beating of an emergency worker. In May of 2025, he was jailed for life with a minimum of 15 years behind bars. Number 11. Conar Shaw. In 2023, Englishman Conar Shaw, aged 31, was handed a 2.5-year jail sentence at Derby Crown Court following a years-long campaign of terror and violence against his partner, Holly Bolsover, At the time, it was known that he strangled her, broke her jaw, and threatened to throw acid in her face so no one else would want her. Derbyshire police became aware of the abuse when they were called to an argument in a car outside their home in the village of Kilmarsh. Officers found Bolsover covered in blood, and the couple's daughter told the police that Shaw had been punching her mother so hard that the entire car was shaking. It wasn't until June of 2025 that Bolsover was able to speak about the horrors she'd survived. She and Shaw had met when they were both 18, but the relationship quickly devolved into one of control and violence. It was toxic from the start. It wouldn't just be a smack, it'd be black eyes, bruises, cuts, or the house would get smashed up. Among the traumatic incidents recounted by Bolsover was one in which her ex tried to drown her in the tub, and another in which he chased her around their home with a serrated knife. Bolsover and the children took refuge in the bedroom, and she desperately held onto the door. Shaw then plunged the blade through the door, and the woman saw it come out the other side like a scene from a horror film. The man ended up slicing his fingers and went to the hospital, where he lied about how the injury had occurred. When Shaw broke Bolsover's jaw, the injury was so bad that her bone was visible. She required hundreds of internal stitches and the insertion of a metal plate. In another attack, he strangled her and struck their daughter when she tried to intervene, inflicting a bloody nose. Shaw reportedly played mind games that convinced Bolsover she would lose her children if she reported him. Those closest to them were, however, aware of the violence. People were turning up at my house in tears thinking I was dead. That's how bad it had gotten. Shaw eventually admitted 2 counts of assault occasioning actual bodily harm, and aside from a custodial sentence, he was handed a lifetime restraining order. In the summer of 2025, Bolsover spoke out about her ordeal and motivated the decision, saying, "I will show women you can get out. You're not alone, and I am living proof that you can get out." By then, Bolsover had rebuilt her life in South Yorkshire with a new partner, and the couple welcomed a son in 2024. Number 10. Shane Peterson. In May of 2025, through tears, Judge Camille Nider of Utah's 2nd District Court told 47 Shane Peterson, "I agree that you should be given the maximum sentence. I am going to run it consecutively. I also am going to encourage the board to keep you until you die." Judge Nider acknowledged that it was the first time she'd cried in court in 25 years. Shane was given 5 years to life after admitting multiple felony charges that included abuse homicide, 3 counts of aggravated abuse, and endangerment. They all stemmed from the death of his son, Gavin, on July the 9th of 2024. On that day, first responders were called to the West Haven home after the boy had stopped breathing. Gavin was pronounced dead at the hospital, where staff found that he was malnourished to the point that several of his vital organs had completely shut down. An examination of messages between Shane, Gavin's older brother Tyler, and Gavin's stepmother, Nicole Lee Scott, revealed a pattern of abuse that had been going on for years, and in which they were all complicit. The exchanges indicated that Shane and the others had systematically starved Gavin to death. He was held in a bedroom that was locked from the outside and given minimal food, while monitored via surveillance cameras. He was held in a room that lacked bedding, blankets, or a carpet. Surveillance screenshots showed the preteen only wearing a heavily saturated diaper as he curled up on the floor. He was believed to have been routinely punished through beatings delivered with a piñata stick. Messages indicated that in Gavin's final days, he was only fed a piece of bread with mustard, 1/3 of a cup of water, and was not allowed to use the bathroom. In spite of experiencing vomiting and seizures for days, he wasn't taken to a doctor, and his death came after unimaginable suffering. Nicole was sentenced to 15 years to life after admitting murder and abuse-related charges, while Tyler had yet to be sentenced as of the latest updates. Number 9. Dean Kapsalis. On the late afternoon of January the 19th of 2021, Henry Tapia, a 34-year-old black man, was driving through Belmont, Massachusetts, when he became involved in a road rage argument with Dean Kapsalis. As the verbal exchange wound down, Kapsalis hurled a racial slur at Tapia before climbing back into his Dodge Dakota pickup truck. Witnesses later testified that Kapsalis deliberately accelerated and struck Tapia with the vehicle, dragging him a short distance along the roadway before fleeing the scene. Tapia, a father of 3, was taken to a nearby hospital where he died of his injuries while Kapsalis surrendered to the police later that day. Prosecutors pursued the case as a hate-fueled killing, citing the use of the racial epithet and the manner in which Kapsalis had used his truck as a weapon. A Middlesex County jury convicted him in May of 2023 on charges of second-degree murder, violation of constitutional rights causing injury, and leaving the scene of a collision causing death. The court rejected the defense's argument that the killing was an accident or the product of sudden emotion. After the verdict, Middlesex District Attorney Marion Ryan told the media the fact that some of the last words Henry Tapia heard were a horrific racial insult meant to intimidate and threaten him based on the color of his skin is something we cannot tolerate. At sentencing on January the 17th of 2024, Judge David Deacon handed Kapsalis a life term in prison with eligibility for parole after 15 years. His sentence had been delayed by an unsuccessful attempt to have his conviction reduced to manslaughter. Number 8. Tubtim Howson. 57-year-old Tubtim Howson was arrested in March of 2023 and held on a $1 million bond after fleeing the United States following a fatal hit-and-run on New Year's Day 2023. Michigan State University student Benjamin Cable, aged 22, was visiting home for the holidays. Shortly before 6 a.m., he was walking along Rochester Road in Oakland Township when Howson's 2016 BMW veered into him. She did not stop at the scene and left the county 2 days later, returning to her native Thailand. U.S. Marshals working with Thai law enforcement located Howson in Bangkok. She was extradited and returned to the U.S., where she was arraigned in Oakland County on charges of failing to stop at the scene of an accident causing death. The judge set her bond at $1 million cash. Her lawyer assured the court that she wasn't a flight risk, arguing that panic had led to her leaving the country after the fatal collision, but noting that said panic had dissipated in the wake of her arrest. Later in the year, Howson pleaded no contest to the felony charge of failing to stop in connection with Cable's death. In July of 2023, she was sentenced to 1 to 5 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. During sentencing, the woman apologized through an interpreter to Cable's family. The victim's father told Howson, "While we were being crushed by grief, you twisted the knife. Not a shred of concern for your victim or his family." Cable's mother echoed that sentiment, saying, "I turn to you as a mother to mother. You have a son roughly the same age as Ben. I cannot understand how you could leave him in the road like garbage after hitting and killing him." Number 7. Deja Taylor. On January the 6th of 2023, a boy brought a 9mm handgun into his classroom at the Rich Neck Elementary School in Newport News, Virginia. Following a classroom altercation, he removed the weapon from his backpack and fired one shot that struck his teacher, 25-year-old Abigail Zy'nika, through her hand and went into her chest. Zy'nika underwent multiple surgeries and was seriously injured, later telling a media outlet it could have been fatal. The boy, who was known to violently act out, told classmates in the aftermath, "I got my mom's gun last night," and referring to his teacher said, "I shot that." Dead. Police traced the firearm to the boy's mother, Deja Taylor, who'd legally purchased the gun in 2022. Taylor told investigators she believed the pistol had been secured in her purse with a trigger lock and that the keys were kept under her mattress, but searches of her residence and her mother's home produced no lockboxes or keys. Marijuana and associated paraphernalia were found during the searches. The incident resulted in a $40 million lawsuit filed by Zy'nika against school administrators, alleging they'd ignored warnings about the boy. On August the 16th of 2023, Taylor pleaded guilty to a state felony child neglect charge for failing to securely store the firearm used in the classroom. As part of the deal, prosecutors said they wouldn't seek a sentence longer than 6 months under state guidelines. Separately, Taylor also pleaded guilty in federal proceedings to being an unlawful user of controlled substances in possession of a firearm and to making a false statement during the gun purchase. Taylor's son was removed from her custody and placed with family members while receiving therapy. Number 6. Apapale Adoum. London law enforcement responded to reports of a break-in in progress on Coulter Road in Hammersmith, in the capital's west, on February the 9th of 2025. Inside the £1.3 million apartment, Met officers found the body of homeowner Victoria Adams, aged 36. She was face down in a bedroom. There was a black bin bag over her head and a pillow on top of it. Adams had suffered at least 10 injuries to the back and side of the head after she was struck with a blunt object. The murder weapon was identified in media releases as a mallet that reportedly had her blood and DNA on it. 39-year-old Apapale Adoum was found at the scene, and he was the one who had been trying to enter the property when the emergency call was made. He was initially arrested for 2 counts of possession of an offensive weapon, to which he pleaded guilty. Adoum was rearrested on suspicion of Adams' murder on June the 5th of 2025, and he admitted to carrying it out, although his motives weren't entirely clear. Adams had met Adoum on February the 6th, 3 days before her death. He was staying in a homeless shelter at the time, and Adams invited him to live with her. She subsequently changed her mind under unclear circumstances and left Adoum a note asking him to leave. At some point in the days that followed, he viciously murdered her. The man was expected to be handed a life sentence, and the hearing was scheduled for late October of 2025. Number 5. Ernest Heinz. On September the 11th of 2025, actor Ernest Heinz and mother of 3, Maritza Arias Galva, were each driving through Galloway Township in New Jersey. 48-year-old Heinz, who'd appeared on The Sopranos TV series and provided face models for 2 Resident Evil video games, cut Arias Galva off as she was trying to switch lanes. The move resulted in a road rage argument when their vehicles were side by side at a red light. According to Arias Galva's son, Heinz threatened the woman, saying, "I'm going to kill you today. Today, I'm going to take care of you." He then brandished a pistol and fired 1 shot through the window of the woman's vehicle, hitting her in the face. In spite of being shot, Arias Galva remained conscious and was able to contact the authorities, giving them a description of her attacker and his vehicle. Arias Galva was hospitalized with serious injuries to her eye, and preliminary reports suggested that she'd been left permanently blinded. Immediately after the shooting, Heinz sped off and right through the Stockton University campus grounds, resulting in an hours-long lockdown at the university. The actor was later arrested at a residence near the campus and charged with attempted homicide, aggravated assault with a firearm, aggravated assault, possession of a weapon, and possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose. The case was ongoing as of the latest updates. Number 4. Joseph Harrell and Zy'nika Ayesha Woods. On February the 13th of 2023, Nong Chong went to the Bank of America on Black Hawk Boulevard in Houston, Texas, and withdrew more than $4,000 for an upcoming trip to Vietnam. Teenagers Joseph Harrell and Zy'nika Ayesha Woods were monitoring her from a nearby vehicle and followed her when she made the 24-mile drive to the 9800 block of Bel Air Boulevard. When Trung left the vehicle, Harrell rushed in and grabbed her, causing the woman to drop the items she was holding, among which were envelopes containing the money. The thieving team picked something off the ground and was ready to make a run for it, but he then noticed Trung quickly grabbing something as well. It was an envelope containing the money she had withdrawn. When Trung tried to flee, Harrell bear-hugged her from behind and then body-slammed her on the concrete. The vicious attack was caught on surveillance video, and Trung, a single mother, was left paralyzed from the waist down in its aftermath. Harrell ran to the getaway vehicle where Woods was waiting for him. They were both eventually taken into custody, and during a press conference announcing the arrests, Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner told the media, "When I saw it, it just made me mad as hell," noting that Harrell had slammed her down like she was a bag of potatoes. Later in the year, Harrell pleaded guilty to aggravated robbery causing serious bodily injury and was jailed for 30 years, of which he had to serve half before he'd be parole eligible. Woods also admitted her role in the violent robbery and was sentenced to 10 years adjudication. Number 3. Hassan Jhangur.
You don't have to say anything, but it may have your defense to do without mention. When questioned, something which may around in court, anything you do to me,
I'm behind your back.
I'm behind your back. 6-1 Tango. I've got 1 detained for driving this vehicle.
On December the 27th of 2023, a wedding day dispute led to life-ending violence in the Burngreave area of Sheffield, England. The bride and groom were identified as Amani Jhangur and Hassan Khan. The feud between their families had to do with the time and location of the wedding and resulted in the bride's family not attending the ceremony held at a local mosque. Later on, while Amani was at the Khan's home in College Court, her mother Ambreen, and sister, Nafisa, arrived at the scene. A verbal argument turned into a physical altercation during which Nafisa was rendered unconscious. Upon learning about the brawl, the bride's 24-year-old brother, Hassan, drove a Seat Ibiza to the scene and plowed into a crowd of people. Among those struck was Chris Marriott, 46, a father of two, who had stopped to help Nafisa as she was lying unconscious in the road. The vehicle first hit the groom's father, Riyasat, reportedly flinging him across the bonnet, and then crashed into a group that included Marriott, Hassan Jhangur's own mother and sister, as well as off-duty midwife Alison Norris. Marriott, a good Samaritan who wasn't involved with the wedding, was trapped under the car and died at the scene. Others sustained serious injuries. After the crash, Hassan Jhangur stormed out of the vehicle and stabbed Hassan Khan, his new brother-in-law, multiple times in the head and chest. He was arrested and reportedly told officers at the station, "That's why you don't mess with the Jhangurs." During the ensuing trial, Jhangur denied murdering Marriott, but he pleaded guilty to dangerous driving causing death and serious injury. In July of 2025, a jury convicted him of murder and causing grievous bodily harm with intent against 4 victims, 2 of whom hailed from his own family. The jury cleared him of attempting to murder Hassan Khan and instead found him guilty of wounding with intent. Sentencing was set for November of 2025. Number 2. Taylor Bradley. On March the 27th of 2023, residents at the Lodge Apartments in Lincoln, Nebraska, discovered that 2 maintenance workers had died after they were run over near the complex clubhouse. The police reported that video footage showed a woman who lived at the property, 27-year-old Taylor Bradley, intentionally driving a Subaru off the roadway onto the grass and striking the men. The victims, later identified as 42-year-old Chris Karmazin and Ronald Gonzalez, aged 45, were hit mere seconds apart. Bradley was arrested a short time later, a few blocks away, and initially charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. Lincoln Police Department wrote in a press release that witness statements and surveillance footage supported a finding of intent because the victims were run over some 20 to 30 yards from any roadway and because Bradley attempted to run over a 3rd maintenance worker, Robert Sargent. During a virtual arraignment, Bradley proclaimed her innocence, then shouted and swore at the judge, saying, "I don't give an absolute F." During that hearing, her charges were upgraded to 1 count of attempted murder in the 1st degree, 2 counts of murder in the 1st degree, and 3 counts of use of a deadly weapon to commit a felony. Bradley was held on a multi-million-dollar bond as the investigation continued. At a bench hearing in May of 2024, a Lancaster County judge ruled Bradley was not responsible by reason of insanity, finding she was experiencing prominent delusions, a manic episode, and psychosis at the time of the March 2023 killings. The woman therefore did not understand the nature or wrongfulness of her acts, and the court ordered further proceedings and mental health examinations to determine whether she posed a continued danger. Number 1. Joshua Cottrell. On September the 19th of 2025, a colleague of Kentucky woman, Kayla Blake, went to her Moorhead home after she hadn't shown up for work. The authorities were called to the scene and they found the bodies of Blake and her teenage daughter, Kennedy McWhorter, inside the residence. The 37-year-old was found in a back bedroom with stab wounds to her head. McWhorter's body was directly across the hall and she had been fatally stabbed in the throat. Kentucky State Police investigators noted that the bodies appeared to have been moved to alter the crime scene. The main suspect was identified as 44-year-old Joshua Cottrell. Neighbors said that he was at the home in the lead-up to the double murder, while statements from Blake's friends indicated that she and Cottrell were in a relationship but that things were good and they were happy. After the connection was made, Cottrell was tracked down to a hospital in Paducah, more than 300 miles west. He reported he had blood on his clothes when he went to the hospital, but the reason for him doing so remained unclear. Cottrell was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of tampering with physical evidence. The case was ongoing and the authorities had yet to determine a motive for the double murder, according to the latest information available in the media. What they did know, however, was that the face-tattooed Cottrell had killed before and had done so in a brutal fashion. On June the 17th of 2003, Richie Phillips, aged 36, disappeared from a motel in Elizabethtown. His body was found 8 days later after it had been stuffed in a suitcase and thrown into Rough River Lake in Breckenridge County. Then 21-year-old Cottrell was described as a loner with no family, whom Phillips had befriended. Witnesses would testify that Phillips was gay and that he was attracted to Cottrell. The latter was confirmed to have been the last person to see Phillips alive and was tied to the killing through witness statements, the purchase of the suitcase, and eventually through DNA evidence. During the trial that followed, Cottrell admitted that he strangled Phillips unconscious and then beat him to death in the motel room before panicking and stuffing his body in a suitcase. However, he claimed to have done so in self-defense because the man had made unwanted advances towards him and tried to force him to perform an oral act. His representatives pursued a gay panic defense, arguing that under Kentucky law, Cottrell was within his rights to protect himself, even with deadly force, from the threat of being abused. Prosecutors could have pursued hate crime charges, but didn't do so, even though they would argue in court that the killer had a steaming anger towards gay men and that he'd murdered Phillips in a cold, calculated manner. A jury ultimately found Cottrell guilty of second-degree manslaughter. He was given a 20-year sentence in March of 2005, with credit for time served. He spent 2.5 years behind bars after he was charged with the 2025 murder. Phillips's mother, Rennie, spoke to a media outlet. She remembered being at Cottrell's trial and a chilling statement he'd made regarding the murder of her son. The woman said, when the judge asked would he do it over, would he kill him again, he said, yeah. Thanks for watching. Which do you think is worse, the death penalty or life imprisonment in solitary confinement? Let us know in the comments section below.